Thank you for joining the Pitt Alumni Association for tonight's Coping with COVID-19, Supporting Mental Wellness During a Pandemic. My name is Marcy Johnson, and I am the Director of Young Alumni and Student Programs at the University of Pittsburgh through the Pitt Alumni Association. Before introducing our presenter tonight, I just wanted to remind everyone to use the question and answer function of Zoom for any questions that you may have throughout Julius's presentation. I am very excited to introduce Julius Boatwright. He obtained his Master of Social Work degree with a certificate in Human Services Management from the University of Pittsburgh. He also earned an undergraduate degree from Pitt in communication. Julius has sat on the Young Alumni Advisory Team for the Pitt Alumni Association, and this past year won the Young Alumni Award over Homecoming and was a Rock Talk feature for a homecoming program that had students and young alumni participation. He serves as the founder and CEO with Still Smiling. They bridge the gap between Black people and mental health support through education, advocacy, and awareness. Since 2015, they've coordinated over 1,000 hours of mental health trainings and therapy for Black community members in Western Pennsylvania. Julius has consulted with and trained the PA Department of Labor and Industry, Community Care Behavioral Health, the Department of Human Services, as well as many others. His work has been featured on media outlets like the Huffington Post, NPR, and TEDx Pittsburgh. He wrote an article about mental health in the Black community that the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette published. After being shared by multi-platinum recording artist Michelle Williams, formerly of Destiny's Child, and nationally syndicated radio show host Charlemagne the God, it went viral, surpassing 20,000 impressions online in less than 3 days. Charlemagne also quoted Julius during a television interview with NBA champion All-Star and Finals MVP Andre Iguodala. Also quoted Julius during saying, "No is a radical act of self-care that can positively impact our mental health." We are so excited to have you with us tonight, Julius. I will turn it over to you.
I just want to say that I am extremely grateful and honored for this opportunity to just spend the evening with everyone. I know we are all doing the best that we can to just get through these extremely difficult times, but we always do get through it. I want to just start by saying that I know it can seem extremely disheartening at the moment because there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of anxiousness that folks have, and that's normal, right? I want to acknowledge that from the very beginning. Those feelings and emotions that you're experiencing right now are totally normal. And we need to give ourselves the grace and the space to feel that way because this is something that we never experienced before. No one knew that this was going to happen. And now that we're months into it, we're just doing the best that we can to get through. So I'm just grateful and honored to be able to spend some quality time with some Pitt alum and current Pitt folks and other folks who have chosen to join us this evening. So as Marcy mentioned, my name is Julius, and I am just honored and privileged to serve with a nonprofit organization here in Pittsburgh called Still Smiling. And we're going into our 5th year of existence. And our mission, again, to reiterate what Marcy shared earlier, is to bridge the gap between Black people and mental health support. And we do that through 3 ways: through education, advocacy, and awareness. And our short-term vision over the next 10 years is to connect every Black person in Allegheny County to a positive mental health experience that improves their quality of life. And by the year 2050, we'd like to do that with Black folks throughout the entire country. So it is a very aggressive goal, but we know with what's happening right now, not just locally, but on a national and a global level, we want to be there to support the mental health of folks all across the country and all across the world. So with that being said, in terms of our programming, there's 3 specific ways that we make an impact in the community. So we have a 1-year workforce development program that's called Beams to Bridges, and Black community members go through that. And at the end of it, they have the skills and the knowledge necessary to serve as community mental health workers and champions. We also have what's called the Black Mental Health Fund, and that enables us to provide financial support to help offset costs related to mental health treatment. And we have our digital mental health and healing and digital mental health and wellness series, where we have conversations with mental health and wellness practitioners every month, and we share those on all of our platforms. So I want to get right into it. I don't really have a long presentation for us today. It's going to be short and sweet, but I hope that all of us are able to find some value in the information that I'll be sharing. And I'm also looking forward to having a conversation afterwards as well with the folks who are tuned in. So first, how do we prioritize our own mental wellness personally during a pandemic? So the first thing I want us to acknowledge is that we are in smack dab in the middle of a global pandemic, right? And when we're trying to process trauma that we've experienced before, things that may have happened in our lives prior to COVID happening, now that we're in the midst of trying to navigate the uncertainties and all of the difficulties that come along with how COVID-19 has hit in our communities, that can make it that much more difficult to process traumatic events from the past. So when we're currently in a trauma and trying to process the thoughts, the feelings, and the emotions of that traumatic experience, it makes it extremely difficult to maybe process something that happened to us pre-COVID, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So I just want us to acknowledge that and give ourselves some grace and space and mercy as well, so that we're not applying so much pressure to ourselves to provide solutions to all of the trauma that we're experiencing as a result of the current COVID-19 pandemic. Second way that we can support our own wellness is to consider using telemental health therapy. So for those of us who don't know what that is, it's basically an alternative to getting mental health therapy that you would receive at an actual office space. So instead of going in and sitting with a mental health professional at their office, we all know that because of COVID, most of us are working from home, and we're doing our best to practice physical distancing. So mental health professionals do have options for us to either do phone or video mental health therapy sessions. So I just started doing my telemental health sessions with my therapist in March, and it has been one of the best things for me in terms of my own wellness and working on my own mental health. We have a conversation every week for an hour, and we have worked through some of the most difficult things that I've been experiencing around some of the racial trauma that's been happening throughout the country. We've worked through a lot of things that I've been experiencing around my own personal and professional identity. And it's just really given me an opportunity to know that no matter what is happening, no matter how much time or energy I'm investing in work, I'm always going to have that 1 hour a week with an objective, non-judgmental, expert professional who can help me work through and process some of those things. So I do know that telemental health therapy is not always an option for folks. Not everyone has the right type of technology or the technology at all needed to be able to do telemental health therapy sessions, whether that be the internet or some sort of tablet or smartphone to be able to do that. So I am fully aware of that. And I also know that some folks, it can be challenging to invite people into your home. Now we're in this day and age of COVID that now we're essentially inviting people into our home. So I understand how that can produce some anxiety for folks as well. So while I'm sharing telemental health therapy as an option that we can use to improve our own mental health and wellness, specifically during this pandemic, I do just want to take a moment and acknowledge that it may not be the best therapeutic or mental health and wellness option for all folks. So I did want to share that as well. The third thing that we can do to support our own mental health and wellness during a pandemic is be very radical about our rest. So I am admittedly the type of person that works from sunup to sundown. And in the middle of this pandemic, I've essentially just worked more, if that's even humanly possible. So it feels like you always have to be doing work. You always have to be accessible to folks. And maybe we feel this added pressure to be more accessible to folks around the clock. So I would say whatever you need to do to be radical about your rest, setting clear boundaries with yourself and with other individuals, because time is a finite resource. It's not something that we have in abundance or it's infinite. So really keep in mind that we have 24 hours in a day and we only have so much energy that we can expend to participate in Zoom calls or to go to different meetings or whatever the case may be, now that it feels like we're so much more accessible because a lot of folks are working from home. So one way that I've been radical about my rest is that I haven't quite perfected it yet, and I don't think I will, but I'm pretty happy with the progress I've made. I am not working as much and almost not working at all on the weekend. So that's something that I've been very happy about and I've been proud about. I'm spending more quality time with my wife. We're getting out in nature. I'm able to do more of the chores around the apartment that I may not necessarily have been able to do because I was doing so much work. So I'm trying to be what's radical for me about my rest, because for me, Saturday and Sunday were really just 2 extra days for work. So really think about ways that you can be radical about your rest as well. So I want to move on to how we can support the mental wellness of our friends, our family members, and those that are around us who we consider loved ones. So the first thing I want to bring to our attention is that we have to find a way to be okay with not always having the solution. So I am the type of person where I'm a fixer. So if I feel as though something is wrong or something, I wouldn't say something is wrong, but if someone is in need of support, I'm going to try to do everything within my power to find some sort of solution or offer up a solution. And in these times with COVID, because things are so heavy, folks are they're losing their homes, they're losing their main sources of employment. We're mourning relationships, being able to spend quality time with the people that we love and we fellowship with and we worship with, and we were so used to spending all that quality time with. And now it's almost like there's a certain sense of helplessness, not necessarily hopelessness, but I'll speak for myself. I have felt those moments of being helpless because I'm like, I feel like there's nothing that I can say or do to be able to help this person immediately rise up and get out of the circumstances that they're in. That's how debilitating and difficult COVID has made it for folks. So we as helpers and healers and friends and loved ones have to get to a point where we navigate that difficulty of accepting that we don't necessarily always have to provide a solution. And also from a strengths-based perspective, know that human beings are resilient and we have the power and the potential to get through whatever it is that we're going through. It may not feel like it to us as a helper, and it may not necessarily feel like that to the other individual that we're seeing who may be in need of support. I've seen over time, and I'm sure all of you watching today have seen that as well. We're so resilient. Think about those moments. Think about those moments in time where you felt like you weren't going to make it to the next day, where you felt like something that happened in your life was so debilitating and so difficult and so agonizing. And now you look back and you reflect on it and you're able to have a deeper, more intimate perspective on it. And you're able to see, wow, I made it through that. And I want to tell you that we are going to make it through this as well. So you don't always have to feel like you have to be the solution or provide a solution. Second way that we can support our loved ones and our friends and family members with their mental health and wellness through a pandemic is try to increase awareness as opposed to alienating people for the way that they feel and the way that they're expressing themselves. So like a number of different things that are happening in our world, the way folks feel and believe and are navigating this COVID pandemic, it can be very divisive and it can pin you on one side or the other. It's like you either wear a mask or you don't. You either respect essential workers or you don't. There's all these, sort of opposites that we can easily fall on one side or the other. And what I found, and having a lot of conversations with my wife as well, she's in the process of going through, and I think in the process of completing actually, what's called Gestalt training. And I don't know much about it, but what I have heard and what I have listened and learned from her and some of the things she shared with me is that it's always about increasing awareness. So as opposed to calling someone out and saying, this is what you need to be doing, and potentially shaming someone or making them feel guilty for not doing something, because they may want to do that thing, right? We don't necessarily know that somebody doesn't have the intention of doing the right thing, but there may be other extenuating circumstances that folks are living with and trying to deal with that may be preventing them or making it more difficult and challenging for them to actually follow through with the thing. So by not alienating folks and by not calling them out, and on the flip side of that coin, calling them in and just raising their awareness by saying something like, letting them know how you feel. You know, whenever we go out for our walk, or whenever we do this thing together and I see that you don't have your mask on, it makes me feel concerned, and I start to worry about your well-being and then the well-being of the other people that we're going to be around, because I want you to know that I want you to be protected and I want you to be safe. So it's not necessarily calling somebody out, but letting them know how you feel and how you really value their wellness and their well-being. So really think about how we can increase folks' awareness and not alienate them for some things that they may not be doing that we want them to do. Another way that we can support the wellness of our loved ones and the people around us is to share how we've overcome challenges in our own lives. So research shows that when we have that peer support, and it's called different things depending upon what, depending upon what environment you're in places of worship, folks may refer to it as a testimony, and in mental health arenas, folks, refer to it as a peer support story. So just by saying, hey, I don't understand, and I may never understand what you're experiencing, and I'm not going to try to sit here and pretend like I do understand, but what I will say is that I experienced something that I think is similar, and this is how I navigated that challenge. Here are some of the people that I leaned on. Here are some of the supports that I was able to access and tap into that helped me triumph over this difficult situation. So in that moment, we're not telling someone that their feelings and their thoughts and their emotions are, they don't matter and they're invalid. We are actually validating and acknowledging their feelings and their thoughts and their emotions, because we all know that people feel things differently, and we need to give folks an opportunity to deeply and openly feel whatever it is that they're feeling. And just by that simple acknowledgement and sharing how we've navigated similar challenges may create a light bulb moment for someone else where they're like, wow, I never thought of that. Or I used to do that, and then some way I ended up stop doing it, but now I'm going to start doing it again. So again, just raising that awareness by even sharing our own testimonies and own success stories. So I want to transition into the final piece of how we can advocate for mental wellness and mental health in some of our more professional spaces. So now work life looks different for a lot of folks. I'm sitting here in my kitchen, and I would normally be in the office. So you know, I'm here, my wife's here, my pup is over there. So the office looks different these days. And one thing or a few things I want to share just to increase our awareness about the level of expectations that we're bringing in and maybe unintentionally placing upon folks, or maybe intentionally. And whether we're doing it intentionally or unintentionally, I want to increase our awareness about them so that we can just give them a little bit deeper thought. So one way we can advocate and support the mental health and wellness of folks in these unique professional spaces that we're in now is that we can really honor and acknowledge that working from home does not equate to 24-hour around the clock access to any and everyone that we're working with. I think that sometimes folks may feel like, okay, we're all at home for the most part. Whenever I send a text, an email, or whenever I call, I should receive an immediate response because we're all working from home, right? It's eliminating the travel time. We don't have to worry about the commute. It's really made it so that we can be highly efficient and we're starting to realize that, like, wow, we really didn't need to have an in-person meeting to accomplish that thing that we felt like we needed an in-person meeting to accomplish. And now so much, we're becoming so much more efficient because that is the American way. That is part of capitalism. So we have to acknowledge that. But one thing we have to be mindful of is that, again, time is a finite resource and people only have 24 hours in a day, and everyone may not want to be accessible all hours of the day just because they are at home and they're near their devices, their tablet or their smartphones. So really not putting that onus on other people to set those boundaries, but ourselves really asking ourselves a question like, do I have to send this email at 11 p.m.? Or do I have to make this call to this person on Friday night at 9 p.m.? Is it necessary that I need to do that? Or is it something that I can wait until Monday to reach out to this person? Or can I set a timed delivery for the message? You can do that in your email to where you set it so if you want it to go out at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. on Monday morning, set your timer so that it does that, so that that other individual doesn't have to shoulder that weight of now feeling obligated to respond to something that maybe wasn't necessarily an urgent or work-related emergency. So another way that we can honor and advocate mental wellness in our professional spaces is we can be flexible with expectations during video meetings. So right now, you know, just thinking about the setup of this, it's a Zoom format, it's webinar, so we don't have, everyone doesn't have to have their face on the screen. Some folks are, you know, you're tuning in from the comfort of your own home, so you might be in your loungewear and you may have some music on in the background. You may be hanging out with your family and eating dinner, whatever the case may be. So there's a fluid and a flexible level of expectation, but you're still able to engage and receive this information that can potentially support your overall mental health and wellness. So more specifically, when we have those actually important meetings, right? The ones where we're like, we're talking about some major topics, and these are things that are going to be important in terms of moving our mission and our programs forward. Still be mindful that folks are working in an environment where maybe they have children that they have to tend to and be present for. So a young child, while they see that a parent or a caregiver and they'll say to them, well, I'm in a work meeting, honey, I'll get back to you later. That child may be in need of some love and some support and attention in that very moment. So how do we as colleagues and employers and institutions honor that and give folks an opportunity to turn their video off, go on mute, still participate, and they're still receiving the information, they're still in the meeting, but not really, we're not enforcing these rigid and strict requirements for them to show that they're present and they're participating just because that's a rule that we want to enforce. So think about how we can be creative and flexible to ensure that people can show up and be their full selves in this digital workspace, but also honor the fact that people have obligations and things within their home lives that if they were in an office setting, they wouldn't necessarily have to worry about that because maybe their kid would be with in a daycare setting, or would be with a family member, or would be in school. So think about how we can create safety for folks so that when they're engaging in these digital spaces, they feel seen and they don't feel pressured to show up in a way that that is harmful for them in their own home or whatever environment they're taking those meetings from. Another way that we can advocate for the mental health and wellness in professional spaces is, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is, and I'll reiterate it, is knowing that every work project is not an emergency and it is not urgent. So I think what is happening now with the pandemic, and we're in green, or in yellow, we're in red, we can go outside, you can't go outside, you can go buy this, you can't buy that. It's like literally toying with everyone's emotions, and that is making us, so anxious and so uneasy. So we have that we're carrying around all the time. But with work, I think, again, what's happening with the pandemic and with all of the racial trauma that we're seeing throughout the country and the world, it's making everyone, myself included, want to jump to the solution. And what is the solution? We need to just throw money at this problem and it'll go away. We need to write a report about this problem and it'll go away. We need to do something about it to provide a solution so that we can feel better and say that we did something to address the problem. So I'm not suggesting that we do nothing. I'm not suggesting that we ignore the weight, the magnitude, and the urgency of acting in this moment and being deliberate and intentional about how we can support folks that are navigating this pandemic and all of the racial tensions that are brewing throughout the country and the world. At the same time, we have to be mindful and ask ourselves, is this thing really urgent? Or do I feel like it's urgent because there's a deep level of guilt and shame and anxiety within me that just wants to say that I did something for the sake of doing it? Now that can actually be more detrimental than helpful. So just be mindful of the urgency around these professional related projects and ideas and solutions that we're trying to put forth, because they can actually produce harm and not be as helpful as we had intended for them to be. I'll end with saying this. I was on a digital chat with some mental health professionals, and one of our preferred mental health providers, she is a brilliant professional, originally from California, raised in Compton, and she's now in the DMV area. Her name is Dr. Lene Plummer. I would encourage you to do some research and check her out. She is with the Onyx, O-N-Y-X, the Onyx Therapy Group. And Dr. Plummer, I asked a question. I was the moderator for this conversation, and I posed a question that I'm paraphrasing, was something like, how would we encourage people, particularly Black and brown folks, how would we encourage them to deal with the pandemic or find hope in the midst of the pandemic and all of the racial trauma that's happening throughout the country? And all the panelists said that is such a complicated and loaded question that there is no one simple answer. However, something that Dr. Plummer said, it really resonated with me, and I try to recall and reiterate it any chance that I get that feels like it's the right moment to share that. So she said, it seems like everyone is in a hurry to get to hope. Everyone's in a hurry to get to hope. And it took a minute for me to digest that. And it took a few days, maybe even a few weeks, for me to really reflect on it and think about what she meant, and then also what it meant to me. So immediately after I heard it, and then in the days and weeks after she said that, I thought, wow, it does. I felt like that. Like I'm rushing to get to hope. I'm rushing to find the solution to solve racism, to make COVID-19 go away, to get everyone their jobs back and make sure everyone has the health care that they need, and get everyone back on campus so we can be back in the cathedral and in the union or wherever it is on campus and having that experience. And the reality is there's this area, the muddy waters, this muck, this painful space that we're all in together right now that hurts. And no one wants to just sit in that area because it's painful. So what we'd rather do is try to find that quick solution so we can hurry up and get to hope and get out of that painful area. From my perspective, and what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to just sit in that gray area and sit with that pain and that discomfort and that uncertainty, because that is where you find true healing and wellness and love and support, and you have those revelatory moments where you really understand and start to deeply and intimately get connected with who you are as a being. And until we do that kind of work, then we will never be able to fully show up for the people around us. So again, I am honored and grateful to be able to spend this time with you all. I hope that folks found a little bit of value in some of the words that I shared. And please feel free to reach out and connect with me and our organization directly. I'm accessible, we're available, and I love being able to say this. H2P.
Thank you, Julius. We have some questions that were submitted. So if it's okay, we'll start off with the first one. So how to avoid caregiver fatigue during this time?
Wow. That is, and I guess I'm thinking of caregiver in a broad sense, right? I'm thinking of, we can consider ourselves as caregivers, right? In a professional setting. You don't necessarily have to be a nurse or an essential worker to be a caregiver. But one of the things that I am doing, again, I'll reiterate the therapy piece, that has been super essential and important for me. Just having that 1 hour every week to debrief, decompress, and just get everything off of my chest has been a lifesaver. It has been monumental and transformative for me. So if you're thinking about telemental health therapy, I would encourage you to try to navigate that and really try to figure out if that's an option that can work for you. So that's one thing. The second one, this thing is a little bit more complicated, and I'll tell it from my perspective. My value and my worth as a human being is directly attached to what I'm doing for other people. So if I'm not doing something to help someone, then I feel inadequate, I feel worthless, and I don't feel like I'm living up to my purpose in accomplishing the things that I want to accomplish in life. So being able to really sit back and say, if you look at your to-do list, your checklist, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? Am I doing them because I genuinely find joy in them, and because it's a part of me being productive and efficient and performing at my job to the best of my ability? Or am I starting to do things maybe outside of work or in work that I'm just doing them because they make me feel better, right? So really thinking about, because again, time and energy are finite resources. So if we're constantly pouring and pouring and pouring, it may give us that ping and that high in our brain to where we feel like I've done something, I get my sticker because I did something good for someone else, but then we're depleting our own energy. And at the end of the day, we're like, oh my goodness, I don't have any more energy to give because we were, I'll speak for me, because I was chasing a high because my worth was attached to the things that I was doing. So really think about, why are we doing the things that we're doing?
Great. Thank you. The next one we have is, how do you answer the question, how are you when you're not okay?
Wow. I have been, admittedly, I've been struggling with that lately. I have been trying to sort of pretend that like everything is okay. So it's just like, how are you? I'm good. Like everything's great. You know, I'm thriving. And I think everyone in these moments can say that something difficult or something, they're experiencing something challenging, and it's not always okay. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is just give ourselves an opportunity to be vulnerable and say that, you know what, I appreciate you asking. I'm not okay, you know, and that's, it sounds easy. It's not easy to say that and to open up. And I think one thing we also have to be mindful of on both ends is that, and this is more challenging and more difficult, if we are not okay, we have to be mindful of, are we telling a person who's not equipped or ready or able to handle us telling them that we're not okay? Because we can be vulnerable and say I'm not okay, but then the other person on that end is like, what do I do? Like, I don't know what to say. I don't know who to refer you to, or, you know, I'm not a therapist. So it can then end up causing more harm than doing good. So I think really walking through that and trying to like slow that process down. So maybe letting someone know, hey, you know what, I'm not doing okay, but I don't want to put you in a position where you feel like you have to receive the weight of what I'm going to say. So asking someone, do you feel like you're in a place to be able to, in a healthy way, help me navigate some things? And if you're not, then I may not share that. So that could go a number of different ways, and it can still leave you feeling unheard, but it at least opens up an opportunity for that person to say, you know what, I'm here, I want to listen, and if there's something that I can't support you with, then I'll try to do my best to help you get connected with someone who can support you.
Well said. Thank you. So the next question is, as an administrative, students talk to me about different issues. How can I support them in their mental wellness?
First off, kudos to whoever you are out there, because you have a superpower that students are willing to open up to you, and they feel like that's a safe space. I could be wrong, but well, you actually said you were an administrator, so you're not it doesn't sound like you're a social worker or a therapist, right? So they're just coming in and sharing those things with you. That, you know, kudos to you for having those relationships. First, take care of you. And actually, I think the most important thing is to know that, I said it earlier, right? You don't always have to be the solution, and you don't always have to provide a solution. You may feel like it because they're coming to you, but that's the beauty of it, right? Imagine if they didn't feel like they can go to anybody. So they wouldn't even be opening up or sharing these challenges or tribulations that they're going through, but now they feel comfortable in the relationship they have with you. So as long as you're attuned and you're listening, and you have that recognition that it's not your responsibility to solve everything, but as an administrator, you know the landscape of the university, you know where the support groups are, you know the counseling center, you know these resources, and maybe even thinking about resources outside of the university setting. So start to maybe try to open up another dimension and think of yourself as as a mediator or as an intermediary, to where if it comes to you, you don't necessarily have to take it all in and provide the solution, but it can just go through you and you can direct the student to another appropriate resource. So now you're supporting them, but you're also protecting your energy and your own wellness too.
Thank you. And as someone that advises students, I'm definitely taking your pointer. So thank you so much. Next question is, how do you help parents cope with their student being away from home in a city with increasing numbers during the pandemic?
Wow. That's a tough one. I think that this kind of goes back to this idea of really sitting in that uncertainty. And I'm not a parent. I'm a doggy daddy. That's not the same thing. I'm no way equating that. But I know that whenever something's wrong with her, like I feel that, you know, it's a deep, real pain, because I feel like, wow, like there's nothing that I can do about it. So I would say this isn't the solution and it's not the answer, but really being able to openly communicate with your children and your young adults, and really being able to have a conversation with them, because their perspective on what's happening with COVID-19, and they may have a different sense about it. They may think, well, you know, our age group isn't being impacted by it, so I can kind of navigate campus or navigate my relationships with people a little bit more freely. So really opening up those lines of communication to figure out, to get a deeper understanding of how they're navigating, and because they may be actually doing everything to actually protect themselves, but they just may not be communicating that with their parent or their caregiver. So opening up that conversation so you can create a two-way street. So now they're giving you information. They're saying, I'm wearing my mask, like I'm not going to any COVID parties that some young kids are having. Like they may say that they're totally protecting themselves, and their core group of friends are too. So I would say just openly communicating and creating a two-way street to have the conversation to get as much information as possible.
Great. The next question here is, any advice on participating in things like Zoom happy hours or virtual get-togethers? Sometimes they make me feel worse because it's a reminder of how different life is these days.
Yeah, it's I'm always envious of my wife, because she's like, I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm getting ready for a Zoom happy hour. I'm like, this is like the 5th one this week. So I'm always a little jealous of that. But it can be like this person said, a reminder of there's no fellowship and no intimacy like in-person intimacy. Being able to hug someone and be in a space with someone. No matter how many digital conversations we do, we will never be able to duplicate or replicate that. So one, just being able to acknowledge that the mourning, right? We're mourning the loss of being able to be in physical spaces with the people that we love and we care about, and being able to hug them and to experience sense with them, and to be in fellowship with them in an in-person environment. So I would say to this individual and whoever is thinking about this, really give yourself an opportunity to go through that mourning process of, no, you may not be able to have all the in-person affection and support that you normally get from your friends and people that you love, but think about what you are able to get from the digital space, because I'm a firm believer that energy is real. So even though it's not the same as being in person, you can still get that energy from someone, and try to figure out a way to like bottle that up and like hold on to that, because it feels like it's going to be forever. It's not going to be forever. So just keep that sense of hope.
Great. So this is kind of a two-part question, so I'll start with the first one. So it says, thank you so much for this webinar. It was perfectly timed. What are your recommendations for finding a good therapist and a good fit therapist? This person believes in therapy and has attended sessions, but has not found a therapist with whom they've bonded. One example is that many counselors seem to be Christian focused, and this person is not religious, so I feel uncomfortable in those circumstances. So that's kind of the question. And then the follow-up to that is, how can you encourage someone to continue to seek therapy after maybe the first appointment doesn't go as well?
I have to just show this off. I have my Pitt
Woo!
glass.
That's retro, throwing it back.
Is. Great question. So I don't know if this is the right analogy or comparison, but I'm gonna use this. If you're dating someone and you're not having the right type of connection with them, you may think, well, this probably isn't the right person for me, right? So you may want to consider not dating that person anymore. Similarly with therapy, right? I think sometimes we feel like we have to stick with a therapist, and you may have a deep relationship with them. I don't know if it's after 10 sessions or 30 sessions or whatever the case may be, or even 3 or 4 sessions. You start to feel this like obligation to sticking with that therapist. And that isn't the case, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. So as the client, as the consumer, as the community member, we are always in control of that process, of that therapeutic process. So we can say, hey, in our own words, this is not necessarily working for me. I want to explore other options. And a gifted, skilled, humane therapist should be willing to honor that and say, you know what, it's okay. Maybe they might want to try to continue to work through some challenges with you, but if you are firm on wanting to find a different therapist, they should be willing to at least help you start to get that process initiated. So try to be mindful and aware of the fact that you are always in control as the client, and you don't ever have to feel like you have to be stuck with a therapist. One of the things that we've been trying to do in making referrals for people to see a therapist is we've been trying to like stretch that process out. So for example, traditionally speaking, someone may say, I want to see a therapist. And so then you contact an organization and they say, great, what are you looking for? What kind of insurance do you have? Are you open to mental health therapy and virtual sessions? And they go through that intake, and then they just, okay, next week on Tuesday, you have a 4 o'clock appointment with Marcy. And you're like, okay, cool. Then you show up to your session with Marcy and you're like, I know nothing about Marcy. Like, I've never met her before, but now she's my pet therapist. Now she's partly responsible or largely responsible for my mental and emotional wellness. So think about what could have happened if you had an opportunity to have a conversation with Marcy, like no strings attached, sort of speed dating conversation where you're like, okay, hey Marcy, like I need to know what kind of therapist you are. I need to know if I'm going to be able to vibe with you, and if the energy is right, and if the way you stack up on paper equates to you being a good therapist to me. So again, as the client and consumer, sometimes we have to call out providers and say, hey, I don't want to just be blindly matched with the therapist. I want to talk to them. I want to go beyond their online profile or what insurance they take or what my copay is going to be. I want to talk to them. I want to get to know them before I commit. Some therapists may or may not be willing to do that, but as a client and consumer, you always have the right to advocate for yourself.
Well put. And I think I would be a fabulous therapist in another life. So we're going to wrap it up here. We have 2 more questions to get to, and we appreciate everyone's questions. So this question is, some people say that sharing difficult personal experiences can make the person who is listening that their situation is being diminished. Can you elaborate a little about it as you recommend to share said experiences?
Oh, okay. I didn't understand it at first. So I think what I hear this person saying is that if Marcy is like, I'm struggling with this, I don't know how to navigate it, and then I'm like, I'm sorry to hear that. I really want to be here to support you. And you know what? I also dealt with something, and let me tell you about my problem. That whoever said that is 1000% correct. It can totally diminish what the other person said, and now they feel decentered, and they feel like, wow, like I'm not going to open up to this person, because the moment I do, then they're just going to start telling me all of their problems, and now I'm going to feel even more overwhelmed and less heard. So I think as the listener and the person who is going to be sharing those, like, here's how I was able to like navigate and rise up through a similar circumstance, that has to be like, you have to be very careful and strategic about when you share that. I would actually go as far as to say, asking the person, maybe not even necessarily in the first conversation or within the first like 5 to 10 minutes of the conversation, like really giving that person an opportunity to just like get out whatever they need to get out, and then ask for permission. Like, I've gone through some similar things, but I don't want you to feel like I'm just trying to tell you, it'll be okay, or you don't have to worry about it, or you're just going to get through it. But if you're willing to, to listen, I'll be willing to share. And if not, that's okay too, right? Like really giving that person the power, because they might say, no, I appreciate it, maybe some other time, but I really just need you to listen to me right now. And then, to just drift back into the listener space. That was an excellent point. Can whoever asked that question email me? I want to teach me some stuff.
Great. Thank you. The last question is, as a young adult, it can be difficult to turn down invitations during this pandemic. What is a good strategy to politely decline invitations so that others can understand their concerns of possibly contracting COVID-19?
Saying just that. I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this a lot, because I'm sure we all, right, because now we're in green, but it's literally something, a news clip or an article came out from the county that right before this webinar, something else happened, like some other restriction or something. So it's like, I don't know what I'm even allowed to do. I'm like really confused at this point. And it's, I kind of smirk about it, but that can cause so much anxiety. And for someone who feels conflicted, right, like myself, I am yearning to be around people. Like that is like my lifeblood, is being around people and laughing and experiencing that joy and that pain and building with people. But now I'm finding that I have to communicate with people, and I have to literally be vulnerable and say, hey, psychologically, I'm still in red. Like in my brain, I'm in the red phase. And you know what? I'm just not quite ready to be around people, and let people know that it is no diss or no offense to them, right? Because what I think people may hear is that, oh, wait, you don't trust me? Like it's just me and a couple people you don't trust, like we're your friends, right? And it can be easy for someone to hear that and receive it that way. But what you're actually trying to get across is that you're just saying, I am in a place where I'm uncertain, where I'm afraid, and I'm not quite comfortable with it just yet. And it has everything to do with me and nothing to do with you. So really sort of letting that person know that there's no blame or no finger being pointed at them, but you, at some point, you will eventually get to a point where you're comfortable with it again.
Great. And someone else put in the person that you wanted the email. We will connect you. The alumna is attending the webinar from Columbia, which is cool.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Thank you for joining us. So We appreciate everyone's questions. And again, thank you to Julius. It's always a pleasure to have you. And thank you for everyone who joined us this evening. For more information about Still Smiling Pittsburgh, feel free to check out their website and their social media platforms. Additionally, the Pitt Alumni Association continues to have events, so please visit alumni.pitt.edu for a list of those. We hope to see you at future programs. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and hail to Pitt.